There are moments when everything fractures at once, when the line between protection and destruction collapses under the weight of rage. And this is one of those moments where every choice feels irreversible, every second stretches into something suffocating. And the storm that has been building finally explodes with a force none of them can contain. Because what begins as desperation quickly mutates into something far darker, far more dangerous, and no one walks away unchanged. Nick is no longer thinking in straight lines, no longer tethered to reason or restraint. Because the moment he realizes Sharon and Noah have been taken, something inside him snaps with a violence that cannot be measured, cannot be contained, and the substances clouding his system only strip away what little control he has left, leaving behind a raw, volatile instinct that pushes him forward at any cost, his hands gripping the wheel as if it's the only thing anchoring him to reality. The road blurring into streaks of light and shadow as he drives faster than he should, faster than he can handle, but stopping is not an option. Slowing down is not an option, because in his mind every second wasted is another second Sharon and Noah are closer to something irreversible. Something he cannot undo, and that thought alone is enough to fuel the recklessness, to justify the danger. To silence the voice that should be telling him he's about to make everything worse. By the time he reaches the abandoned warehouse, the air feels wrong, thick with something oppressive, something waiting, and Nick doesn't hesitate. Doesn't pause to assess, doesn't even consider what he's walking into, because patience has been burned away, replaced by a singular, consuming need to act, to strike, to take back control in the only way he knows how, and the moment he steps inside, everything detonates at once. The confrontation with Matt Clark igniting instantly, violently, without warning, fists colliding with bone. Bodies crashing into rusted metal and splintered wood. The sound of impact echoing through the hollow space like a countdown to something catastrophic, and there is no negotiation, no attempt at reason. Because Nick is beyond that now, beyond words, beyond strategy, driven purely by a surge of fury that has been waiting for an excuse to surface. Matt is not caught off guard the way Nick expects, because this was never meant to be a clean rescue, never meant to be simple. And the way he fights back reveals just how calculated this entire situation has been, every move deliberate, every strike meant to provoke, to escalate, to drag Nick deeper into the chaos he's already losing himself to, and it becomes clear that Matt doesn't just want revenge. He wants collapse, he wants Nick to destroy himself in the process of trying to save the people he loves, and for a terrifying stretch of time. It looks like he might succeed, because Nick's movements become more reckless, more unrestrained. His vision narrowing until there is nothing left but the target in front of him, the embodiment of everything that has gone wrong. Everything he has failed to prevent. Sharon sees it before anyone else does, sees the shift from desperation to something far more dangerous. Something that cannot be easily pulled back once it crosses a certain threshold, and even as she struggles against her restraints. Her focus isn't just on survival anymore, it's on Nick, on the realization that the man fighting in front of her is slipping away. Becoming someone ruled entirely by impulse and rage, and that if no one stops him, the consequences will extend far beyond this moment. Far beyond this building, but she can't reach him, not yet, not while Matt is still standing, still pushing, still feeding the fire. Noah refuses to stay still, refuses to remain a bystander in a situation that's already spiraling out of control. And despite the ropes cutting into his skin, despite the risk of making himself an even easier target, he forces himself into the conflict. Throwing everything he has left into disrupting Matt's advantage, and it's reckless, it's dangerous, but it's also the turning point. Because it shifts the balance just enough, creates a crack in Matt's control that Nick seizes without hesitation, and in that moment, everything erupts. Nick's fury reaches its peak, no longer restrained by doubt or hesitation, and the intensity of it is overwhelming. Each strike carrying the weight of fear, guilt, anger, all the emotions he has been holding back crashing forward at once, and Matt, for the first time, begins to lose ground, begins to feel the consequences of pushing too far. Of underestimating just how far Nick is willing to go when everything is on the line, and the fight turns brutal, unrelenting. Until it becomes painfully clear that this is no longer about stopping a threat, it's about obliteration. And that is the moment everything teeters on the edge. Because there is a difference between defeating someone and destroying them, and Nick is seconds away from crossing that line. Seconds away from doing something that cannot be undone, something that will follow him long after this night ends, and Sharon knows it. feels it with a clarity that cuts through the chaos, and somehow, despite everything, she reaches him, not physically at first, but emotionally. Forcing her voice through the noise, through the rage, through the storm inside him, until it finally breaks through. Just enough to make him hesitate. That hesitation is everything. It's fragile, fleeting, but it's enough for Sharon to close the distance, to pull him back before the point of no return. Before the consequences shift from survival to irreversible damage, and in that moment, Nick is forced to confront what he's become. What he almost did, the reality of how close he came to losing himself completely, and the weight of it crashes down hard. Replacing the adrenaline with something colder, heavier, something that doesn't fade as quickly. The rescue is complete, but it doesn't feel like victory. Because as the sound of approaching sirens cuts through the aftermath, reality comes rushing back in, sharp and unavoidable. And Nick knows that this doesn't end here, that his actions have consequences that won't be erased just because Sharon and Noah are safe. And the presence of law enforcement transforms the scene from a rescue into something far more complicated, far more dangerous in a different way. Because now the question isn't just what he saved, but what he's going to lose. Sharon stands at the center of it all, caught between relief and fear, knowing they survived something that could have ended much worse. But also recognizing that the fallout is only beginning, that the emotional damage, the legal consequences, the fractures exposed tonight will continue to spread, affecting everything they thought they understood about themselves and each other, and Noah. Shaken but alive, carries his own realization that courage and recklessness are often separated by a line so thin it's almost invisible. And crossing it can change everything. And somewhere beneath the noise, beneath the sirens and the chaos, one truth lingers with unsettling clarity. That this wasn't just an isolated incident, not just a single act of violence in a vacuum, but part of something larger. A chain reaction set in motion by manipulation, by vengeance, by the kind of calculated cruelty that doesn't end when the immediate danger is over. And even as Matt is subdued, even as the immediate threat is contained, the damage he intended has already been done. Because he didn't just create a crisis, he exposed the fault lines that were already there, and now those cracks are impossible to ignore. What comes next won't be about survival in the same way, but it may be just as brutal. Because the battles ahead won't be fought in abandoned warehouses or under the cover of darkness, but in courtrooms, in boardrooms, in the quiet. Suffocating spaces where guilt and consequence settle in, where every decision made in anger demands to be accounted for. And where the hardest fight of all begins, the fight to live with what was done in the name of saving everything.